It was 1964. I was energized by the civil rights movement, the women's freedom movement, but I was disillusioned with my small women's college, talking the talk, but taking no action. My overprotective mom refused to let me go to Africa on a humanitarian project after my junior year. So instead, I got an occupational therapy internship at a posh mental hospital in upstate New York. I taught sewing, among other things, but it was the time of the women's liberation movement, free love, but abortion and birth control were illegal. I met a mental health tech, and we had a great time riding around on his motorcycle going to New York City, and I lost my virginity on the grounds of the mental hospital. And I got pregnant. So my boyfriend and I agreed to part ways. I decided to handle the pregnancy by myself. Following many fruitless attempts to get an abortion, my mom contacted my deceased father's college roommate, Dr. Grosskloss, who was an OBGYN in Miami, Florida. He agreed to deliver my child, to find adoptive parents, and to get me a job. Consultation with the dean of students and the physician for the college, we agreed that I was absent due to detached retinas. My family were informed, but not all of the people in my small Iowa town. So a star student coming back as an unwed mother just wouldn't do. At Christmas time, Mom and I went to Florida to get me settled in my little house. I started my job as an admissions clerk in the small hospital where I was supposed to deliver. I loved that job. I made friends with my boss, with the Cuban chief resident, with the nurses who also had had babies. I was ambivalent about the movement of my baby. I wanted to nurture it so that it'd have a good life, but at the same time, I didn't want to feel it because of my shame. I did talk to this unknown child while I was doing my best to live on my own for the first time, to have my first adult job. Labor came on with a vengeance. I was knocked out, which was the protocol at the time, and I woke up packed in ice with the chief resident holding a rose. I knew I wasn't supposed to know anything about the baby, but I convinced Dr. Grosskloss's nurse to tell me at least it was a girl, born April 21st, 1965. As I was leaving the hospital, the CEO wished me well, and he said, "Never look back." How easy it was for him to say, how impossible it was for me to do. In the next few years, I got my master's in social work, I got my doctorate in psychology. I was a medical social worker, a professor, a clinical psychologist. I was doing well professionally. I got married. I was well liked. But at the same time, I felt uncertain, kind of off course when I was alone. During all this time, I was sad and guilty, feeling the shame with my secret. I felt like I was wearing a great big red A on my forehead. When I got pregnant, I was delighted. I was going to have a baby to take care of myself. But it wasn't to be. She died in utero at 10 weeks. After that, I resented mothers and babies. I distanced myself. I had missed the chance to stay up all night when she was sick, to teach her words and colors, to go to dance reviews, to go to sports events. I ended up with primarily adults in my practice. I wanted to search, but I learned that I wasn't supposed to do that until she was a young adult and could make her own decisions. So then I contacted Dr. Grosskloss, and he said the adoptive father was in the British diplomatic service. He promised to call if my daughter called here. And John's husband's daughter was in England, so we visited England very frequently. And we checked the records looking for Mike Marshall, the name I had on the adoptive papers. But we didn't find it. So I assumed Dr. Grosskloss had lied, probably sent her to some horrible family or maybe put her into slavery. In the summer of 1995, I got a call. Are you Susan Plock, Bromley, born December 4th, 1943? Yes. Do you have brown eyes, brown hair, high hips, and you're a klutz? Yes. I think I'm your daughter and you can hang up and call me later. I knew this was protocol from before, and I said, absolutely not. And instead of the 6 months we were supposed to wait before making contact, she said, how about next week? I said, yes. And what a week it was. I was cleaning the house top to bottom. I had planned 30 presents for her because she was 30 years old. We went to the airport, and when we hit home, we hit the floor. And we were checking feet. We were checking hands. We were checking teeth. We even checked the top of our mouths where there was a bump. She said she'd had a hard time when a lot of her friends talked about family resemblances. The only person with brown eyes had been her adoptive maternal grandmother. She was pleased that I wasn't a dressy girl. Her mom was petite. She wore flowers. She was color coordinated, often down to the color of her Kleenex. Karen hated being dressed up in bows and ruffles. Karen had been searching too, and she contacted Dr. Grosskloss, who lied to her too. But her dad had an FBI friend who found the admission slip that had my mom's name and address and phone number. And with further diligence, Karen got a hold of my sister's number, and then she called me. Our few days were amazing. My cousin was going to get married August 15th, and I wanted her and her husband and her child to come back. I checked with my cousin or my niece. She said it was fine. My family was delighted. They were gracious, and Karen bonded particularly with my favorite cousin, Christine. The next step was visiting her family in Cayman. Lee, her adoptive mom, and I went to a mother's lunch. And her mom ordered conch fritters. I ordered a turtle burger, which isn't served in the island anymore. I talk with my hands. And There was dead silence, and I noticed my finger was in her dipping sauce. She said, "You are her mother." The next summer, Lee and Mike visited me in Colorado. We had a wonderful road trip. And our first years in Grand Cayman were absolutely delightful. But there were struggles. My husband, John, had been particularly difficult, and Karen banned him from the island. Her parents and I were worried about her working so hard at the store, her having to deal with an absolutely impossible ex-husband, her temper, which was well justified. I felt bereft when she had an American boyfriend and they visited America very often, and they never visited me. During the same time, we had really delightful times going to the beach, running around on the island. I was working, so I used to just go for the weekend, which really surprised my fellow travelers. A major rift occurred on my 70th birthday. It took a year of my cousin Chris negotiating before Karen and I were able to talk again. Karen felt I was smothering her with my mothering. I tried to figure out what I was doing. I grieved a lot. I'd never mothered a child, and I hadn't been there for the tough parenting. My hurt had put me into high gear mothering so I could feel whole. So I was concerned about her store, her mothering, her relationships. I offered financial support, and the only time she accepted it was for high schooling her daughter Katie in Canada. I backed off, tried to figure out what I was doing. How could I claim to be a mother of either my stepdaughter or my birth daughter? I hadn't had the sadness, the joy, the attachment of parenting, and I felt horrible. I wanted to continue to be in her life, and I remembered Mom and I used to talk every Sunday afternoon. So I instituted Sunday afternoon visit talks. And when she didn't answer, I left voicemail. And over time, Karen and I began to have really good talks about everything, about her daughter Katie, among other things. We'd spent a lot of time searching for my lost boyfriend, her birth father. And she did 23andMe, got a hold of one of his daughters, and we were thrilled. But we were really disappointed to learn that he had been diagnosed bipolar. He was an alcoholic, hadn't been a very good father, and he died in 1995. So Karen continues to have a relationship with her half-sister. I think it's going to be cordial, but kind of distant. Over COVID, our conversations deepened. We loved talking about what was nature, what was nurture. We both have similar senses of humor. We both like to speed when we're driving. We tend to point at things. We love spiritual issues, and we are both incredibly stubborn. So we begin to laugh when we're trying to control each other. This past summer, Karen suggested a visit. I was thrilled, but I was terrified. She hadn't been here for 15 years. I was sure I was going to be so boring she'd want to leave 3 days before the planned week. When she arrived, I decided that I would share my fears with her. She was relieved, because she was scared too. We spent a lot of time about the difficult things she had experienced in her childhood. She said, "When I met you, I expected you to be my fairy godmother, and you weren't. So I relegated you to just another parent." I shared my over-mothering and my smothering and a lot of other things. We laughed, we cried, we hugged. We talked nonstop. And when we went to lunch with one of my friends, I was pouring tea for her, and the lid fell in her lunch, at which point she knocked her earring out. My friends were hysterical. They said, "She is your daughter." So, despite handling overwhelming stressors, Karen wanted me and my friend Donna to come to Cayman for my 80th birthday. The trip was absolutely spectacular. We spent a lot of time on the beach. We had a sunset cruise. We visited Stingray City. And I had one wonderful long night just talking with Karen by herself. Donna and I fell in love with the 4 dogs, the 3 cats. My granddaughter Katie was absolutely delightful. We had a lot of fun with Karen's and Katie's friends. My journey of motherhood has not been the norm. Our joys, our ups, our downs, our struggles, our joys have all been done as adults. But I've finally learned over time that the most essential ingredient is deep, profound, and stubborn love. It's been 59 years since I birthed that absolutely beautiful girl that I can now claim as my daughter.